Settlement Advisory Committee meeting. Hope you all enjoyed not having a meeting in July. We deserve 1 month where we can let people take their vacations, etc. The agenda for today is going to be a majority of updates and put us in good position for receiving proposals for the remainder of the season that we can then make some decisions on over time. Everyone always asks, how much money do we have? And we're going to spend the first part of the meeting actually exploring that. And I have better news than you may have thought I might. There are a total of 7 settlements for which we either have received money from or will continue to receive money from. Those 7 do not include the most prominent one in the news, which is the Purdue Pharmaceuticals / the Sackler family. That is still to be decided. There were decisions at various levels of the court, including the Supreme Court. There are negotiations going on. The bottom line is the separation of the family and the company and the issue of the family, of course, not wanting to see the same kind of financial penalties on them. There's nothing I can update at this point on that. We will be told when there's any news. All of the various states that are involved in the settlement with that family and company are in this process. So I'm not going to say much more because it won't help the committee at all. And if you do have legal questions about it, fine. We do have legal counsel present on the call, but I don't think it's going to be super relevant until we hear something. So I'd rather spend my time on the other 7 that actually we're receiving monies on. And I will read them to you. One is called the distributors. We know that we get almost $3 million per year scheduled to occur through 2038 from the distributors. But keep in mind the abatement fund gets 70% of that. I'm going to give you rough estimates here because the total dollars is not the issue. It's the ballpark of where we're going to be when we can make recommendations. From the distributor pool alone, that would be about $2.1 million. Janssen is about $100,000 this year. It will go from 2026 through 2031 at various levels per year, but somewhere in the $500,000 range. Again, take 70% of that. So for this year, it'll be about $70,000. The next one I'm going to talk about is Teva. That is $780,000 this year, which for us would be about $550,000 for the abatement fund. From 2025 to 2035, that will range from in the mid $700,000 range. The nice thing now that's different than all the other years we've been in session on this committee is that there are now predictable annual amounts. They can change because companies can decide to prepay from one year to the next or whatever, but generally there'll be predictable amounts that will come in each year. Next company is Allergan, $773,000 this year, which for the committee would be again in the $550 range. And that will run only from 2025 to 2029 in the high $700,000 per year range. CVS, $682,000. That will run from 2025 to 2032 in the $1.3 million range on average. This year, we'll see about $500,000 from that. Walgreens, $665,000 this year, which to us would be about $420,000. From 2025 through 2037, that will pay off in amounts from around $680,000 to almost $1 million. And then the final one, Walmart, only in 2024 is that paying $6.58 million. 70% of that, of course, would be in the $4.6 million range. So that's a rather large payment, but that's very different than these other settlements that run anywhere from 5 to 20 or more years. This one is a big payment now and not much afterwards. Ed Baker, the Janssen payment was $100,000 this year, which is $70,000 to the abatement fund. The reports that I've gotten from our financial people thus far is we've received about $11.7 million in the last several months. So a lot of these payments were scheduled sort of in the summertime. So you've heard me talk in previous meetings about the fact that we would have money, but some of the money is already obligated. So I just want to follow that line of thinking for a second, because there are a few funded activities that have explicit legislative intent language relating to ongoing funding. For instance, we have the outreach positions from 2 years ago and case management, which is in Act 22. And it says these positions shall be funded annually by the abatement fund. And they always have a line, unless and until the special fund doesn't have sufficient monies to fund it any longer, which would make sense. In our last recommendations, of course, the Overdose Prevention Center was approved, and it is part of Act 178. There it says, it is the intent of the General Assembly to continue to appropriate funds from the Opioid Abatement Special Fund through fiscal year 2028 for the purpose of awarding grants to the city of Burlington for the operation of the pilot program. Now, we all know they aren't going to be able to spend a lot of money right away because there is no such facility yet. But still, in this time period between now and 2028, it was the intent that the opioid abatement funds would continue to fund the expenses associated with that. Next, Recovery Residences, Act 113 of 2023. It is the intent of the General Assembly that recovery residences be funded annually at not less than fiscal year 2025 levels through the Opioid Abatement Special Fund. So again, this one we have a little less, at least I have a little less understanding of what that money is doing. That was not necessarily the money that our committee recommended. But it was part of the legislatively written uses for this opioid abatement money. You'll see that's very important because there's a number of recovery initiatives, some having to do with recovery workers and workforce, some having to do with recovery certification, some having to do with the organizations that credential housing and peer support workers, etc. So we're going to need to dig into that a little. I know we're going to get some proposals from the recovery sector, but it's going to be important to know, especially if people agree with a perception I personally have, which is recovery housing needs to be augmented. We need to know if there's already money going to that, how it's being utilized. Then the final one that is sort of already in play is the syringe service programs. You recall we had some testimony from them last year. It wasn't the intent necessarily of the committee to use the abatement fund money for syringe service programs because we didn't have as much awareness into their needs, but they certainly did get appropriations. And it again says the intent that syringe services be funded annually at not less than the fiscal year 2025 levels, which is about $1 million, by the way, through the Opioid Abatement Special Fund, provided funds remain available. So in that short 4 items I've just described, $5 million. If that were to recur each year at that level for the next several years. So, and again, I'm giving you ballpark number, not a precise number on purpose, because that's all we need for the purpose of today's discussion. So if you think we've gotten in 11 million, there's already 5 million that's obligated, which is fine in a sense, because that means there's still 6 million that actually the proposals can start to flow in. There can be innovative and creative strategies that we haven't yet utilized that we can then make recommendations about. I will say, though, that there are also some areas that I didn't describe in these 4 buckets that the legislature had mandated that we continue to fund, that we have decided to continue to fund. So some of that includes harm reduction supplies. Some of that involves the whole contingency management program. So we just have to be always conscious and aware of programs that got jump-started here, but yet may not yet have a, if I may call it, a sustainability plan. And not that this abatement fund shouldn't be the default for a sustainability plan, but we have to be very judicious in how we think about this, especially if there are other new items that really seem compelling that we want to ensure we still have funding for. So I've thrown a lot at you in the first 20 minutes of the meeting. And I'm going to take a deep breath and let people ask questions or just react to it. Um, Again, I kind of see it still as a good news story because now that we have some concept of the regularity of payments on an annual basis and the amount of those payments, there is some promise in all of that, even without the Sackler family funds entering into this. But again, this year may be a little overinflated because of that one-time Walmart payment that was quite large, probably about $4.5 to $5 million to our fund. And that isn't going to happen with regularity from one settlement. So other years may be less energizing for us to talk about. Any discussion?
I was wondering if you could just repeat one thing quickly, Dr. Levine. Right before you listed the recovery housing one, you talked about something else that was,
Yes.
supposed to be down through 2028, but somebody knocked on the door and I had to answer it really quick. I just wanted to repeat what that one was. Sorry.
It's the one you would want to know about the most.
Okay.
So the Burlington Overdose Prevention Center.
All right. Yeah, I got a suspicion. Okay. Thank you.
And that's $1.1 million was the
Okay.
original amount.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Dane.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to kind of follow up on the four things that you mentioned having sort of expressed legislative intent to continue funding, but just wanted to reiterate like some things like xylazine test strips that, we appropriated $100,000 for to like keep those kinds of things even from original Act 22 on our radar, right? So we'll need to keep.
Right. I was thinking of them in that category of harm reduction supplies, whether that be strips, whether that be Narcan, a whole host of things. But you're right. You're right.
And just or not, kind of having the repeat that we had with syringe services, where it's like, oh, we thought this was good for another year, right? Just that we'll keep that on our radar as we're finalizing proposals.
Right. And another part of this meeting is going to be getting some updates on what we've been spending money on. And I think from that, you'll get a little sense for how much we either have or haven't had to dip into some of these funds. And if they're actually reaching a point where they use things so fast that we need to rapidly replenish supply. I don't think we're going to see that, but still.
Thank you.
Other comments or questions? So this is a moving kind of target in a sense because, like I said, payments do not all come in on a given date for every settlement that's out there. They're all on their kind of schedules. But the regularity from year to year is going to be important and valuable for this group to hear about. So I'm happy to move off of the money topic, which gives me renewed energy to want to see some proposals and really see what cutting edge things we can do in Vermont that we might not be doing now. But let's hear from Kelly Doherty about an update on our fiscal year 24 funding, and I'll turn it over to her.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Levine. So I wanted to give an update just on the initiatives that were funded through Act 22. There should be an updated document on the website later today or tomorrow, where you can just go and see where we are with all of these. So as far as naloxone distribution, That has been ongoing through June of 2024. Or just for the first 6 months of 2024, we've distributed 33,342 doses to community partners. And last school year, we started an initiative to ensure that all K through 12 schools have access to naloxone on site. A number of schools came on board in the spring. And so we are doing additional training in October after the start of this coming school year for the rest of the interested schools. So we're really pushing for all schools to have naloxone on site. So that's another part of our community distribution initiative. Vending
And that's been,
machine.
Kelly, you might mention
Yeah.
also, that's been met with very positive feelings from the school community.
Yeah.
Their only issue is they have so much on their plates that the timing is not always ideal for them. But it's not like people don't want this to happen. There's
Exactly.
been some very good response. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, no, that's fine. Yeah, there was just
On that-
some timing in the spring, with the spring break, and then, after spring break, things get very busy for schools, so some of them wanted to wait until the fall.
Kelly, can I just quickly ask, when you say, hoping to get all K through 12 schools on board, is it like the way it currently stands? Is it at least that all the high schools are like right now, and middle schools, or is that, yeah?
It's kind of a mix right now. It was really based on the readiness of the schools, but there's certainly interest across the board. And we are thinking about not just the middle schools and high schools, because schools are often community gathering places. You think about events and other things that happen at elementary schools where, it might not be the elementary school students, it could be community members or, parents or someone else who might need to be responded to with naloxone. But right now it's really a mix, because it was based on sort of school readiness and, their voluntary participation.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so the vending machines that were funded through Act 22. So we did do an RFP, and there was a lot of upfront research that needed to be done on the different types of machines and sort of places that have rolled them out and what works best where. And really what we're looking at is not just naloxone vending machines, but what we're calling public health vending machines that would also have harm reduction supplies, like fentanyl and xylazine test strips, safer sex supplies, other things. So we do have agreements with a couple of organizations that are being worked out now. So those organizations will be getting ready to purchase those machines soon. So I know it's been a while, but like I said, there was a lot of research that needed to go into this. And I believe, I'll have to look and see, I believe there were 3 organizations that were getting them, but I will confirm that after I'm done talking. The mail order home delivery naloxone, that went live last October. Through our website, anyone can go on and have requests naloxone be mailed to their home. And as of today, we've received over 900 requests that have been processed through that online form. So that's been great. And the RFP for the emergency naloxone boxes that organizations can, put in their spaces. There's an RFP that is out now for organizations to request those. We ran into a lot of issues with the state sort of contracting process, but we're moving ahead with those. So that's sort of in the naloxone category. I'll pause and see if anybody has any questions there. medication dosing units, as you recall, these are the satellite locations for the hubs. So we did issue an RFP last November. As you recall, the goal was to have a location in Addison County and Chittenden County, in the southeastern part of the state, and then with corrections. There was a lot of confusion because the way that the final legislative intent, or the legislative intent, came out, there was an error in the way the funding was broken out, and that took quite a bit of time to sort that out. But we do have agreements in place with 3 organizations for the Chittenden, Addison, and southwestern part of the state. And then the dosing unit that is embedded in DOC, that has been moving along. DOC and VDH and WellPath, which is the DOC healthcare contractor, and BART, which is the local hub. They just met a couple of weeks ago for most recently, and they are just looking at areas of negotiation in their MOU, looking at roles and responsibilities and regulatory and security issues. So they are meeting again next week. So that has been moving along quite well. So I would imagine that that would be up and running after not too long. The outreach positions that Dr. Levine mentioned previously that are intended to be funded sort of ongoing. We have grant agreements executed with the preferred providers. Those grants are currently being amended to extend that work through FY25. And I can say that one of the challenges has been for this initiative is workforce. So I don't think that that every preferred provider has an outreach worker on board, but they have been mightily trying to hire those folks. And I can get more information if folks would want it on exactly where successful hiring has taken place and those folks are on board. Jess.
Hi, yeah, thanks, Kelly. I was just wondering a couple of things, like, for like things like outreach positions, like we had, when we had been discussing that and funding that, like I think we had really, a lot of intentions and hopes of what those positions would look like. So I think it would be really helpful to hear, like, what are they doing exactly, like what,
Yep.
how many people are they reaching? Yeah. How long have some of the places been doing it, the places that have been hired, and what's been achieved so far, rather than just like their outreach positions, at certain places, like, just like some more specifics on that stuff, because it is a lot of money that I think, it's important work. And but just, being able to know that it's a lot of money that's, really getting like bang for the buck, like Dr. Levine says sometimes,
Sure, yeah.
it's
That,
really useful in bringing in people who are not in treatment, or bringing people into, services that they weren't getting.
mhm.
Also, one other thing, I don't know if you have this now, but it would be good to hear, like, in some of the categories, like the naloxone category or other categories, like, if, like, what's been spent so far, like, has
Yeah.
the funding been spent that was intended to be, and that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
just
Yeah, we can certainly provide that with the minutes. And I will say that as far as the outreach grants that went out to the providers, they have to do grant reporting, and a lot of what you're talking about, like how many people did they reach, and all of that would be included in their grant reporting. So I could certainly get kind of a summary of where they are and sort of what kinds of things they're doing. The intent was, when those were written, was that these folks would be interacting with other service providers, like homelessness service providers, law enforcement, other community organizations, going out into the community and interfacing with people and trying to connect them to services. So that's what was written into sort of the grant agreement. but I can get more specificity on sort of how many organizations have successfully hired them and have them on board.
Thank you. That would be great. Like, I recently just learned, and I was really excited because I was like, oh, we were a part of this, on the settlement committee of a person that was hired in Burlington that is kind of like working together with street outreach and the Chittenden Clinic to like help people that are having major gaps in treatment, like get to the clinic if they missed it, and help get people started and like be that bridge between. And I think that's a super awesome, use of an outreach position. So I think there's probably some really, great things like that getting done. So it would just be cool to, hear some more details on it and what other counties and programs are doing with it. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Yeah, sure. The next category was the SSP program support. And again, it was overdose outreach work. And so these grants were fully executed. There was some other funding, as you recall, that funded that work through the end of calendar year 2023. So back in January, we have grants executed that started January 1st of 2024. So those grants are out there to the SSPs. I see a hand, but I can't tell whose it is.
I think it's Jess.
Legacy. Oh, is that an old hand, Jess? She may have stepped away. The next category is contingency management. Again, one of those things that's being funded on an ongoing basis. 13 of 14 preferred providers elected to participate in contingency management. So those grants are active. There was a lot of TA resources that we needed to bring in to get providers sort of up to speed on best practices for contingency management. And so through the spring, there were a lot of TA meetings and trainings conducted with providers. And then right now, as we speak, the grants are being amended again to continue them through 2025. Like Dr. Levine said, that's an ongoing sort of activity, and the technical assistance continues, but providers are ready to be providing that service. The wound care telehealth program is up and running. There are 5 infectious disease practitioners participating to assess people presenting with wounds at 9 partners throughout the state. Some challenges have been that participants sometimes are not wanting to wait at all to have to get into an appointment with an infectious disease provider. So they're trying to increase the utilization now and maybe trying meeting initially with a provider in person and then transitioning to telehealth. But the program is up and running. Unfortunately, I don't know how many people they've seen so far, but I can certainly get that information. Jess, is that a new hand?
But it was only like one person maybe that they had seen. I just heard an update on that.
Yeah.
From someone on infectious disease. I think there's only been like 1 or 2 people so far. But yeah, but
Right, very, very low uptake.
Yeah. The fentanyl and xylazine test strips initiative, that contract has been in place for since last fall, and orders are being filled. So that's going on. And then finally the drug checking machines. Grant awards have been made to AIDS Project of Southern Vermont, the HIV/HCV Resource Center, Howard Center Safe Recovery, and Vermont Cares. Actually, the grants are being moved for execution, and the grants will start September 1st of 2024, and it's going to be a 2-year grant to August 31st of 2026. So once they get their grant agreements, they'll be able to purchase those machines and have them in their facilities. Jess? Oh, sorry.
sorry.
Yeah, and like I said, I can provide information on how much has been spent or what's remained unexpended in these initiatives. I will say, due to, you know, the time it took to get some of them up and running, staffing issues and those kinds of things, we do have quite a bit of unexpended yet appropriated funds for these activities, but I can provide more detail on that for the minutes. Any other questions?
No,
Okay.
that was great. Thank you very much for running through those. We're gonna let you keep talking, because at the last meeting, we came to a consensus about what our process is going to be in
Mhm.
terms of planning for future projects and requests for proposals. And I'd like you to provide a report to the committees so they know where that stands now and how we're sort of poised to embark.
Yes. So I will share my screen. Let me get this up. So actually, I'll start with the timeline that was provided actually in the last. So what we had agreed upon was sort of a more formal than we have been, but not a super formal process for requesting applications for settlement dollars. So what we had said was that we would post an application. And when we do that, we have it on our website and we publish it on Vermont Business Registry. And we also, you know, once it's posted, share it out with partners. So we would share it out with all of you and with, you know, our partners here at the health department to spread the word. So I'm going to share my screen real quick, just so that I can remind you of the timeline that we had agreed upon. I'm so used to having more than one screen in front of me that I'm struggling here. So hold on one sec. And I know I'm probably sharing your faces right now, but let me get to. Are you seeing my screen? No? Okay. Not too fast. Okay, now you're seeing your faces, but can all of you see this proposed timeline?
Yes.
Okay, so this is what we discussed in June. So what we had agreed upon is that by September 1st, we would post that application on our website, and applications would be due by the 20th of September, which is not going to be a huge lift because as you'll see, I'm going to show you the application after I walk through the timeline. The application is not super cumbersome, so it shouldn't take a long time for an interested party to complete the application. Once the applications come in, we would share them with all of you for your review. And I will also show you the preliminary form that we would ask committee members to complete, which would indicate whether each of you think would vote on each proposal, whether you want to move it forward for consideration or not. And then once we sort of have a consensus or an idea from all of you which applications to further consider, we would extend an invitation to those applicants to come to one of these meetings to discuss their proposals in more detail. So that would take place in October, November, and December. Then we would solicit your input, and I'll show you that form as well, on which proposals each of you think should be funded. And then we would communicate back out to you the results of that. We would notify the applicants whether their proposals would sort of make the cut for recommendations to the legislature. And then we would finalize the recommendations and send them on in January to the appropriations committees. So that's what we had discussed last time. So now I will show you the application that would go out publicly for, oh, Monica, I see you have your hand up.
Thanks, Kelly. I'm sorry. I'm trying to figure out it. The process still imagines, and the process as originally kind of designed, still imagines that it's going to be part of it will be presented as also as part of the VDH budget. So how does that work with that timeline? Does that work, or is that too late?
That's how it worked before. We would submit our recommendations to the appropriations committees in January, and then it would be considered in the big bill. So we didn't have recommendations last year until the end of the year. Yeah.
Perfect. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. So this would be, basically, this is a Microsoft form that we would post for organizations to complete. Provides information on sort of the timeline when the application is due, and sort of, you know, what the process is with respect to these grants or these funds being made available on a state fiscal year cycle, so that applicants understand sort of the process. So this is just an introductory sort of overview. I don't know why that's not all showing right there, so I will fix that. And it's a pretty basic application. Organization's name, contact person, you know, contact information. And then asking about what geographic area they're proposing to serve. Which areas of the continuum does this proposal address? I'll have to put an S in parentheses here because people are able to choose more than one. But we want to be able to see, is this prevention? Is it, you know, harm reduction, treatment, recovery? And then we just ask for a brief description of what they're requesting the funds for. So this is just a free form text. What are the expected desired outcomes for their project? And then just the amount of funding requested. At this point, like, if we're not going to ask them to provide a detailed budget until we decide whether they're going to be considered further. So just a round number of sort of the amount of funds they're looking for. And then whether they're seeking one-time or ongoing funding. If somebody chooses one time, then they skip past questions 11 and 12, don't even show up, and they go right to the end. If they choose ongoing, then they'll be asked for what time frame they're requesting ongoing funding, and then if ongoing funding is not possible, do they still want to be considered for one-time funding? So they'll be asked that, and then we ask about a sustainability plan for when settlement funds are no longer available. Once they click submit, the message, which as I printed this as a PDF, it doesn't show up, but it says, thank you for submitting your application. You will hear from the Department of Health by, you know, no later than October 3rd, I think, because we notify them on the 4th if they are being further considered. That way people know what to expect once they hit submit, so that it's not just, you know, feels like it's not going into a black hole. You know, would love feedback on this. I can send it out after the meeting, but just keep in mind that September 1st is right around the corner. So we want to get this up on our website by next Friday. So if you have feedback, we will need it in pretty short order. So that's the application. I'll pause there and see if anybody has any immediate questions or comments. Again, trying to keep it simple. Okay. So next I will show, oh, Yep.
Sorry. I was just thinking about, so that it's kind of a short window like we talked about. And so only people that would know, like the only people that would know about it are people that know to like check the Department of Health website, like for RFPs and things.
No, we would,
Sorry.
yeah, no, once it's posted, we can share it. This committee can send it out to, your networks. We
Yeah.
can share it out, to our, recovery centers and, preferred providers and, we would want it shared widely. So, and then we could just share the link to our website or to the business registry.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. So then, once these applications. Oh, yes, I'm sorry, Dr. Lee.
I was thinking a little bit like Jess was as well. How we sort of have the canvas far and wide, especially the first time around when people don't have it in their line of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I guess word of mouth will do a lot, but you don't want to rely on that. And
Right.
there is another, in your original slide, it wasn't just on our website, but it's somewhere else that it's appearing.
Yeah, it's on the Vermont Business Registry, which is where all of the bids and
That's what I
RFPs
thought.
and everything go out there. So, yeah, so it will be there and then,
Okay.
on our website. So, yeah, and I think that between the legislators that are on this committee and the providers that are on this committee, and then the contacts that we have at the health department, I think we'll be able to spread it far and wide.
Good. And then my only other question was, if that window of time is too short, especially this first go around, are we absolutely saying anything after September we're not going to look at, or could we still elect to look at late coming proposals?
I think that's up to this committee. I mean, we certainly could. It's the reason why I initially drafted it that way was so that, because we don't know how many proposals we're gonna get, and if we wanted to invite the applicants to this meeting, but certainly we could consider whether to keep the application open longer.
Yeah, I just know how these things go where suddenly somebody gets wind of it and they say, oh, I talked to so-and-so and I learned this and that. I'd really
Right.
like to show you my proposal.
Right.
So I guess what we could do is we'll know at the September meeting what we have gotten,
Mhm.
and the committee can then make a decision and vote on it regarding the opportunity to let further applications come in while we had room to entertain them during
Sure.
some of the fall months. So we'll take your lead, and if there's opportunity and the committee wants to do it, we won't feel we're restricted in any way.
Right.
Thank you.
That sounds good. So the thinking is that once the applications come in, typically when we do an RFP and people send in applications, we don't look at any applications until they're all in. Just because you don't want to start biasing yourself by looking at applications as they come in, and then the ones that you looked at most recently are the ones that are more fresh in your mind. So typically we hold applications and then review them all together. And the idea is that we are looking at a SharePoint site that committee members would have access to read, download, and download documents. So we would put all of the completed applications into a site that you would all have access to if you're a member of the committee, to be able to review all of the applications that came in. And then we would send just to the committee this form Seeking initial feedback. So this is preliminary recommendations as to whether each application should continue to be considered, or whether right off the bat, we feel like, no, this isn't appropriate. We have the recusal language in here, so that committee members who are affiliated with an organization, must recuse themselves. So we have committee member name. For each proposal, we would ask, so there would be multiple questions, there would be this question for each proposal. Do they think this proposal should be further considered? Yes, no, or recuse, and then rationale. And so if we got 10 proposals, there would be 10 versions of this question. And we would take all of those responses and send them back out. We would send the results out to the committee so that you knew which proposals are, being further considered. Lauren.
I just wanted to talk about the process when we accept that form and when we make decisions about whether something's going to be considered or not. That's I think that's committee business.
Mhm.
So that would have to take place
At a meeting. Okay.
So I think we can collect the forms and distribute to the group, knowing that the group should not discuss the form outside of the meeting. And then maybe at the beginning of the meeting, we can see if there's a consensus around which ones we're reviewing or not.
Okay.
But I just caution not to make any business decisions, process decisions outside of the meetings.
Thank you. It's good to have a lawyer in the room.
How is it right?
Any questions about that? Okay. So then, once the decisions are made about which proposals the committee wants to consider further, we would invite those applicants to come to a committee meeting so that there could be more. We would ask them to submit a detailed budget, and we would invite them to the meeting to have more of a conversation. The committee could ask questions of the applicant and just get more information, so that committee members can determine whether they're interested in funding the proposal or not. So that would happen in the months of October, November, and December. We would have those presentations. Again, it's hard to know if that's a tight timeline or not when we don't know how many applications we're going to get and how many are going to move forward, but we'll just have to see how it plays out. So we would have, we would learn more about the proposals at those meetings. And then finally, right, dealing with one screen is difficult for me. Then committee members would be asked to make their final recommendations via this form, and I'm gonna say that we'll have to actually make those decisions in a meeting, but you would provide your feedback through, again, another form. So this form's just a little different. Again, there would be this question repeated for each proposal under consideration, asking, do you support funding this proposal? Strongly support, somewhat support, don't support, or recuse. And people would be able to list their rationale for their recommendation. I'm realizing right now, as I look at this, I'm wondering if I should add a question. I'm curious what the committee thinks. If I should add an optional, like fund them at what amount, like fund them at the amount they requested or fund them at a different amount. I could add that as an optional question. But depending on how much money we have to work with and what proposals we get, we might want to consider that. Jess.
Hi, sorry if I missed this, but so this would not take the place of like another like the actual voting, right? Because like what if a bunch of people write somewhat support and that kind of thing,
I think that's the conversation we would have in a meeting.
Yeah.
So we would collate these results, and then that would be sort of the fodder, I guess, for the conversation that we would have at a meeting.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I just want to make sure, that we like really, discussed, all, and, like hash that kind of stuff out.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, good. I'm glad you brought that up. Good point.
And at some point, we might need to then do a rank ordering, because we could have
Mhm.
six strongly
Exactly.
support proposals, all of which add up to way more money than we have. And then
Right.
we'd have to have those hard discussions about where the priorities are.
Yeah. Yep, and we could do that at an in-person, or one of the meetings.
Exactly.
Kelly, do you think, I mean, I'm just thinking about what Jess just said and what Dr. Levine just said. It almost feels like not necessarily for sharing with the whole committee, but like I can imagine going through this for myself and wanting to organize my own thoughts. Like these are my top tier
Yeah.
ones and my next tier, so that if I was gonna try to convince somebody else, I might put my energy into the things that were on my own sort of top of mind for, so not necessarily ranking to share, but more the opportunity to force myself to think about all of them and kind of put them in my own order in my own head. I don't know.
Right.
I'm not sure if that's just me and I can do that independently, but it just
No,
feels like,
I don't think it's just you, because as I was doing this, you can have a question in forms that's a ranking question. And I was like, and I started to kind of go down that road myself. So we can think about what that process could be, or we could prompt people to rank, somewhere in this form, but I think we'll have to think through how that works.
I have one more kind of comment. I'm thinking that if we decide that we want to hear from someone and have them present, that we also build in time for like committee discussion about what we heard, rather than just like hear a proposal and then like have some, other agenda item and then we leave and then we go, vote on our own. Like, because we all have expertise in certain areas and it, might be important for committee members to be able to share and people with experience to be able to share like how, people, that they know of have experienced, this, thing that exists or doesn't exist or the need for it. It would just be good for us to be able to talk as a committee amongst ourselves too. And so I don't know if that's a given, but it just felt important to say that it'd be good to build into like agenda time that after we hear from people, we kind of all have a discussion too.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, Jess. That's a good point. I think that's really important. Lauren.
Yes, so when we consider what we're doing with the form on the latter end and also on the other end, if it's used as part of the committee business, if it's brought in as kind of a ranking document and submitted, it does become public record, as opposed to using it, I think, in the way Monica was suggesting, as a personal tool to kind of organize your thoughts. That could, as long as it's not introduced and used in the meeting, not be used as a public record. And so just so there's awareness from committee members as they're filling out this form, providing their justifications, I think it would be good for folks to understand whether that writing is going to become a matter of public record or whether it's for their own personal.
Yeah. Okay.
Reflection.
Any other thoughts or questions? Again, I'll share all of these three forms out via email after the meeting, and that way, if there are suggestions, you can pass them along. Yeah, Carolyn.
Hi, I just had a thought, and maybe it's one for the earlier forms, but is there a place on there already that sort of people can talk about what their current funding is, just so we have some idea as we're screening through these?
There isn't. So kind of getting at the need.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a
Really
good point.
Yeah, because I think like there are things like when we hear proposals, sometimes like I think Dr. Levine has even touched on this, that like we don't know like what is the base funding already, and what, you know, like where exactly the need is, what exactly funding will go to, because like there have been things that have just been a little bit more general, and we just want to be really thoughtful. I think all of us do, with limited funds and so much need about that. So I think that is an important point, like that it would be good for us to hear, you know, like level of need and what exists already.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna stop sharing so I can see. Is that a new hand, Lauren?
Yeah, and just in terms of process for this committee, have we voted on accepting the application process and those forms so far?
We did at the last meeting. The forms, the way they exist now, they weren't in Microsoft Forms yet, but I listed all the fields and the timeline and everything, and they voted on that in July.
Right, so this has already been approved by the discussion.
So it looks like there are no other questions.
Thank you very much, Kelly. This has been very helpful, and this has been great work. And it's going to allow us to really proceed on schedule, having this open up, so to speak, on the 1st of September. Before we leave the topic, I do believe Scott does have some input he wanted to, or some follow-up perhaps he wanted to give us on the topic of the website itself and public access to it.
Nope. That process that Kelly laid out, the excellent work that Kelly laid out pretty much covered all of my concerns. So nothing to add at this time.
Awesome. Thank you. Before we get to the public comment portion of our agenda, any other comments on any of the items we brought up today, or on other items that people want to address as part of the committee business today? Kelly's got her hand up, so let's go for that first.
Since we do have some extra time, I thought maybe I would just give an update on the Overdose Prevention Center work
Good.
and where we are with that. So
Yes.
we've been actively working on the operational guidelines that we were tasked with putting together here at the health department, and we just got approval to move forward with those from the governor's office yesterday evening. And so we now will be beginning, that's hard to say, a stakeholder engagement process whereby we'll be seeking input on the operational guidelines. And so we need to submit the operational guidelines to the legislature no later than September 15th. So, and then, you know, once those are sort of finalized, we'll be working on getting the grant out to the city of Burlington, who will then, you know, be tasked with sort of the work of getting the OPC sort of off the ground. Lauren?
I'm raising my hand because I'm not sure what the etiquette is, but I'm a tag team because we've been working on it together. So just to kind of, I think many of you are familiar with it, but these operating guidelines are for any OPC that wanted to operate in the state, and not just, there's the Burlington pilot, of course, but not just, the operating guidelines are broader than that. And just to say, you know, where we are in the process, the office, the department has put together a draft, and the governor has looked at it, the secretary level has looked at it to say this is ready for stakeholder feedback and input. We don't have final sign off at that level yet, but it is ready for all that collective discussion. I think many of you, we've had set up two big meetings next week with SSPs and with recovery providers. There will be other, and we got those on the books because those are larger groups, and we wanted to make sure that folks could attend the meetings. If you have not received an invite, or if you know of a group that hasn't received an invite, sit tight, they're coming. We just got approval last night to share the document, so that invite is coming and you will get an email. I just don't want folks to feel concerned that they're not being included in the feedback process if they haven't received an invitation yet. That said, if you haven't heard from Kelly, me, or somebody from the program by mid next week, and you really want to see the document, review the document, hear about it, please let us know. I think really we want to be as inclusive as possible and hear all voices. So if you haven't heard from it or don't have an opportunity, please let us know. And so we are in a tighter timeline. We have 2 weeks to do this and to incorporate feedback, and then give Monica's team, et cetera, their chance to really dive into it and chew on it. So we're going to be moving quickly through the process, but if you can bear with us and work with us over the next 2 weeks, we're looking forward to it. Thanks, Lauren.
And I feel like the proud grandfather, but I'm going to say it anyways. As still Representative Whitman knows, the department was given a very tight timeline here to get guidelines out for an entity that essentially has never existed in Vermont, almost has never existed in the United States. And the New York City site is much different than what will happen in Vermont and what will happen in Rhode Island. So I'm very, very proud of the team for really putting together a lot of information from around the country and the world, and trying to establish and really provide guidelines for what you might term best practices for an entity that in some ways we think we know a lot about, but in many ways we really don't know a lot about, because that kind of experience, it just isn't widespread here in the United States. It's gonna be fascinating to see what the stakeholder engagement process yields. I personally would say it will be hard to argue with what's in the document. It's very comprehensive and it covers, I think, all of the relevant areas. But certainly there'll be variations in people's thinking on how we may have addressed some of those areas. But I don't think the actual breadth of the topic areas will be surprising or up for lots of discussion. Any other discussion the committee wishes to have today before we move to public comment? Okay, so members of the public who wish to make a comment.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
I can't
Oh,
see
great.
you though.
Okay. I don't know why that is. I click my my camera, but it doesn't seem to be I don't know why that is. I'm sorry about that. So
We can hear
is it
you
okay?
just fine now.
All right. So first I want to say so thank you, Doctor and Dr. Levine and your department for moving quickly on overdose prevention centers. We all know how crucial this is. We'll look forward to seeing the proposed regulations, and thank you for opening that process to providers and to the public. I would like to, I think Kelly mentioned, or was maybe Lauren mentioned, that you'd like to be inclusive as possible with that. So I would like to be invited, although I'm not affiliated with any entity or organization. I am an activist in the field, and I've been involved in this since the beginning. I'd like to be invited to early on to one of those briefings on the regulations if possible. Um, with that, I'd also like to, in the chat, I have, I put it's a video invitation to our gathering on August 29th at City Hall Park on the Green, an overdose awareness gathering, really sponsored mainly by Team Sharing Vermont, the parents who have lost, beautiful children to accidental, to drug use, to substance use in Vermont, to show our solidarity with them. So please, if people on this committee can come, copy the video invitation and distribute it widely, so we can show these parents that they're not alone and that we can actually express in a visible and vocal way our support for them and also for overdose prevention centers. I'd like to make basically two comments today, and they both bear on the funding application process. The first, I'd like to reference a memorandum from the chair on March 10th, 2023 to Senator Jane Kitchell. This is the opioid settlement funding recommendations for fiscal year 2024. So this is a quote, a very brief quote. The inescapable conclusion and prevailing sentiment have been to fund harm reduction and treatment engagement at this early juncture. And as increasing settlement dollars become available in subsequent years, to then strategically allocate funds to prevention, programming, and initiatives. So this is the committee's agenda, is stated in this memorandum to Jane Kitchell. And for the life of me, I don't remember the committee voting on that. I do not remember the committee voting on this idea of you would first fund harm reduction and then subsequently allocate funds to prevention programming. I think we need to take a look at that and rethink that, because the possibility is that you may wind up funding harm reduction for the life of your committee, if that's what the needs in Vermont determine. So that's one point. The second point really bears, specifically to this idea of reviewing proposals, debating proposals, and approving proposals. There was mention made of if a person has a right to vote and the vote bears upon their organization that they are to recuse themselves. I would challenge that. And I would challenge that based on Thomas Jones. Thomas Jones is a consultant to the Vermont State Ethics Commission. He appeared before this committee on May 28th, 2024. And Dr. Jones unequivocally, and with depth, explained that there's something called good cause clause. And under good cause clause, a person does not have to recuse themselves, even if there is an apparent conflict of interest. If they have something to contribute that's of value, that's of worth, that is indispensable, then they are allowed to claim good cause and contribute. So I would suggest to this committee that both those forms that have basically three sections, yes, no, and recuse, I think a fourth section should be added, and it should be non-recusal due to good cause. I'm afraid that if we adhere to recusal, ignoring good cause, that the voting balance of the committee will be tipped in one situation or another in an unjust way. And I want people to really think about that. I want to say that, you know, for my 2 cents, you know, as the public, I really wish more of the public were here, but I guess I am the public. I'm very enthusiastic and I'm very proud of everything you've done. And I intend to remain a part of the committee as a public commentator for the life of the committee. I think we've done in a very difficult political environment. I think we've made a lot of progress for the least of us, for the voiceless, for the disenfranchised, for the misunderstood, for the unloved, unprotected, unseen, unheard, unrepresented Vermonters who are dying 1 every 2 weeks in downtown Burlington. So thank you for your efforts, and please, you know, follow Thomas Jones, an invited expert and consultant on ethics. Look in the minutes. He strongly recommends a recusal policy be developed by this committee. And I strongly recommend in that recusal policy inclusion of the good cause clause. So thank you. That's my comments for today.
Thank you. There are other members of the public with comments to make. Hearing none, a motion to adjourn. Very good. We heard a motion and a second.
Hopefully we'll see you on the 29th.
And we'll make sure that this next meeting is late in September, since we have a certain timeline that's been laid out for us now by our process.
Sean Burke will second the motion to adjourn.
Thank you. Anybody opposed to this? All right. We'll give people 40 minutes back. Thank you very much for your attention and attendance and comments.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.